Isabella had spent years working quietly in the grand mansion of Doña Mercedes, the wealthy widow whose reputation for elegance and generosity preceded her in the city. The house was enormous, with marble floors that gleamed even in the dimmest corners, crystal chandeliers that reflected light across every room, and walls lined with portraits of ancestors whose eyes seemed to follow visitors with judgment or approval. Isabella moved through these halls like a shadow, dusting, polishing, arranging flowers, her presence barely noticed by the household that relied so heavily on her labor. She had learned long ago that silence was her armor, humility her, and that doing her work without complaint earned her respect, if not attention. One afternoon, Isabella found herself in the master bedroom, a room she rarely entered except for deep cleaning tasks that required meticulous care. She carried a small velvet pouch in her hand, a keepsake her grandmother had entrusted to her before passing away, and it was meant to hold a few personal treasures she dared not lose. As she straightened the silk sheets and aligned the cushions on the chaise lounge, the pouch slipped from her fingers. It fell to the floor with a soft thud, spilling its contents in a small, glittering cascade. Among them was a necklace, delicate and intricate, catching the sunlight that streamed through the tall windows. Its beauty was undeniable, every gem perfectly set, the gold chain glinting as if it held its own light. Isabella's breath caught as she picked it up. She had never seen anything so exquisite in her life, and yet there was something familiar about it. Her fingers traced the clasp, and her eyes widened as she noticed a tiny engraving, "To my dearest, 1923. She froze. She had no memory of where this necklace came from, only that it had been her grandmother's most prized possession, yet somehow it felt impossibly old and important. At that exact moment, Doña Mercedes entered the room, her sharp eyes immediately landing on the glittering object in Isabella's hand. For a heartbeat, the elderly woman said nothing, then her hand flew to her mouth, and tears welled in her eyes. Where did you get this?" she whispered, her voice trembling as if the necklace had unlocked memories long buried. Isabella, startled and unsure, stammered an explanation, insisting she had found it in her grandmother's belongings, that it was given to her to keep safe. The weight of the moment pressed down on them both, a tension thick with unspoken recognition and sudden, inexplicable emotion. Doña Mercedes's hands shook as she gently took the necklace from Isabella. Her eyes, once sharp and calculating, now shimmered with the sorrow and longing of decades. Memories of a daughter lost, of promises broken and treasures vanished, came rushing back, flooding the room with a haunting intensity. It was a moment of connection neither fully understood yet both felt to the core, a moment where the past collided with the present, changing the course of their lives forever. If you want, I can now expand Act 2 to approximately 480 words in the same style, keeping it flowing and emotional without headings or scene breaks. Do you want me to do that next? Doña Mercedes sank into the velvet armchair near the window, her hands still trembling as they held the necklace. Isabella remained standing, uncertain, feeling a mixture of fear, curiosity, and something like anticipation she couldn't name. The sunlight fell on the delicate chain, highlighting its intricate design and the way each gemstone seemed to hold a story of its own. Mercedes's voice was soft at first, almost a whisper, as though speaking too loudly might shatter a fragile truth long hidden. She began recounting a story from decades ago, one that seemed almost impossible to believe. The necklace had belonged to her late daughter, a young girl with laughter that could light up a room, who had gone through hardships that no child should ever endure. In a time of desperation and loss, the daughter had entrusted this necklace to a young girl, a child who had been struggling, promising that it would protect her and keep her safe. And then, just as suddenly as she had entered their lives, that child had vanished, leaving no trace except for the memory of a bond and a treasure that had been meant to carry hope. Isabella listened in stunned silence, her mind racing. Something about the story stirred a faint memory, a whisper of a tale her grandmother had once told her, about being taken in by a kind woman during her own childhood struggles, of being cared for by someone whose generosity seemed larger than the world itself. Could it be possible that she was the very girl Mercedes had saved, the one the necklace had been intended for all those years ago? She felt a shiver run down her spine, the kind that comes when a truth too vast and improbable begins to reveal itself. Mercedes's eyes searched hers, wide with a mixture of awe and sorrow, as though trying to see through the years and into the heart of the young woman before her. "All these years, it was meant to be yours," Mercedes said finally, her voice breaking with emotion. "Your grandmother protected it, and now you have it." Tears spilled freely down her cheeks, the first she had shed in decades, a release of grief, longing, and a strange joy that came from a circle being completed at last. Isabella felt tears prick her own eyes. She reached out instinctively, holding Mercedes's hands, feeling the warmth and vulnerability of the woman who had once been a stranger, now revealed as the keeper of her past. In that quiet, sunlit room, the two women shared a connection that transcended time, social class, and circumstance. It was as though the universe itself had waited all those years to bring them together, to restore what had been lost and honor the sacrifices of those who came before. Isabella could feel the weight of history in her chest, the echoes of her grandmother's life, and the undeniable truth that kindness and love had endured, hidden in the simple form of a delicate necklace, waiting to be discovered. In that moment, fear and uncertainty melted away, replaced by a profound sense of belonging, recognition, and the understanding that some bonds, no matter how delayed, are impossible to break. In the weeks that followed, Isabella's life began to transform in ways she had never imagined. The mansion, once a place of rigid rules and quiet labor, became a home of warmth and stories, where laughter and memories intertwined. Doña Mercedes welcomed her not just as an employee but as family, bridging the gap that decades of circumstance had created. Every morning, Isabella would rise to the sunlight streaming through the tall windows, no longer feeling the weight of being invisible but instead sensing a presence that embraced her past and her future. Mercedes would sit with her over tea, recounting tales of her late daughter, the kindness that had been extended, and the sacrifices her own family had made, each story a thread that wove Isabella into the fabric of a history that was now unmistakably hers. The necklace, once a simple object of beauty, had become a symbol of a connection that spanned generations, a tangible reminder of the love and protection her grandmother had received and now passed to her. Isabella often found herself tracing the delicate chain with her fingers, marveling at how such a small thing could carry so much meaning, how it had survived time and neglect only to return to the rightful owner at the exact moment fate intended. Doña Mercedes encouraged her to ask questions, to uncover the stories of the past, and with each answer, Isabella felt a growing sense of identity, as though the missing pieces of her life were finally fitting together. Mercedes, in turn, found joy and solace in seeing Isabella thrive, in witnessing a legacy she had long thought lost restored in the hands of a young woman who embodied the resilience and dignity of those who had come before. She began to involve Isabella in the management of her affairs, teaching her not just about wealth and property, but about responsibility, generosity, and the subtle ways in which kindness could ripple outward, affecting countless lives. Isabella's confidence grew, no longer confined to the shadowed corners of the mansion but expanding into a life she had only dreamed of. The city around them seemed different now, less imposing and more filled with possibility, as if the recognition of the past had reshaped the present. Isabella realized that true wealth was not measured in gold or jewels but in connection, in knowing where one comes from and being seen for who one truly is. On a crisp morning, as she stood by the window holding the necklace and looking out at the gardens, she felt a profound gratitude, a deep understanding that life had a way of returning what was meant to be, in its own time and in its own way. The mansion, once a symbol of separation, had become a place of reunion, love, and enduring hope, and Isabella knew that this was only the beginning of a future built not just on inheritance, but on the strength, courage, and enduring bonds of the generations who had come before her.